Hi, I'm Alex, and you're listening to Catholic versus Atheist.
Tell the audience a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you believe, and why you believe it.
Sure. Well, my name is Alex Steer. I grew up in Melbourne, Australia. I've been there almost my entire life, 24 years. And I am an atheist. Now, how I got to being an atheist, most families you hear of are Christian or something like that, right? And then the person has this really hard time transitioning to atheism because they got these pressures from their parents and whatnot. But for me, my parents didn't raise me to be an atheist, but they didn't raise me to be anything. We never talked about God once. Not even once. Even though there are, 3 churches and a mosque on the street that I live in. It's ridiculous. So when my friends talked about it, even like when I was young, I was like, what are they talking about? Like, there must be, right? Father Christmas is real, and these guys are all talking about, oh, there's someone up in the clouds, God. There's a heaven up there. I'm like, okay, that must be true. Yeah, sure. I really hadn't explored that world at all, right? So then I think when I was about 16 in high school, I was actually rejected by a girl because she said her parents wouldn't let her because she was a Christian. Like, apparently she really wanted to. She was crying afterwards and she's like, oh, I can't because I'm a Christian. My parents won't let me. And I was like, what? That's crazy. That's nuts. Looked into it a bit more and I was like, wow, this is what they actually believe. That is crazy. Absolutely crazy. Then I researched it more and was like, hey, I sound like an atheist. Santa Claus gone, Tooth Fairy gone, their story's gone.
So have you ever stepped inside of a church or synagogue or a mosque or anything like that?
Yes, yeah, a few times. The first time I went to a church was youth group in high school. I was probably about 14 or 15. Some of my very good friends from primary school who then I went to high school with, they're like, oh, let's come to youth group, which in Australia is just a group of young people who go to a church and they just do different fun activities like go rollerblading, ice skating, throw darts, eat party pies, all those typical Australian things. And sometimes we did read from the Bible, but I think I was looking at it just like as a complete skeptic. I was just like, this is just so weird. Because this is the first time I touched the Bible. I was like 15 or something. And the pages are so thin. They're really like delicate in the Bible. Like, what is with this? Like, that's what caught my attention the most. I wasn't even reading. I was just like, God, this paper is so thin. So, call me oblivious, but when they were talking about Moses and Mary and stuff like that, I was just like, please. Like, I'm here to have fun. I'm here to throw darts, not to read the Bible.
Yeah. So, how would you describe your philosophical journey from 15-year-old to today? It's actually only 9 years, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you become a hardcore atheist at any point?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think there's a comedian who said there are 2 types of atheists. There are the bad atheists and the good atheists. Okay. And he said the bad atheist is someone who doesn't want to go to see his church friends, and they don't want to go inside a church, and they don't want anything to do with religion at all. Okay. Right? So they're like very close-minded, I would say, and very like religionophobic. They don't want anything to do with it. Yeah, so I was one of those for a while. But then the good atheists are the ones who are like more, like I am now, willing to converse with people, go inside churches, and, talk about it, rationally, and not get into arguments every single time. And I became, this more lovey-dovey atheist, I guess I could say, from watching a show called The Atheist Experience. Ever seen it before?
No.
Yeah, it's a wonderful show. Callers call in, ask them their questions, and the hosts give their answers, and that's like pretty much it. Okay. Just 5 calls every episode. It's fantastic. So I watched that, and I was like, yeah, they're right. Like, they're right. There's no evidence.
What role did book learning and philosophy in particular play in your worldview, or has it played any role?
I would say absolutely none, because the atheist position is basically like the null position. We don't have to do anything. Okay. It's just the theists who have to give me their arguments and back up their arguments with evidence and reason enough for me to believe it.
How do you view science, mathematics, logic, reasoning, and critical thinking, these sorts of things? How do you view them?
Well, as a maths and science teacher, I think that they are the things that we should be worrying about today. There should be more of a focus on STEM subjects, which are science, technology, engineering, and maths in schools, because that's what's going to progress mankind. And I can contrast that with religions, which I don't think are going to improve mankind.
I want to contrast your perspective on science and technology and math and that sort of thing with your perspective on your mother's love for you. How do you see those two worlds?
Well, I would say that they are completely different. Unfortunately, my mum passed away a few months ago in October.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So that was a bit of an experience. It was very sudden. So, I've thought about that as well and how that comes into atheism. And it's harder as an atheist to deal with death because to me, she is just gone, But she had managed to help 40 people by donating her organs and tissues. So that's great. But probably to you, if somebody dies, they would be up in the heavens looking down on you. Is that right?
Or in purgatory or in hell.
Purgatory is both, like going to heaven or hell, right?
Once you're in purgatory, you're safe. You're going to heaven.
Oh, okay.
You're just being purified. But yeah, so I like to think that most people go to heaven, but the church does not say what the relative populations of heaven and hell are at all. We'll not comment on that because the church doesn't know.
And the book's 2,000 years old. How could it possibly? How could it update itself? It's
we're not a Bible alone church. We have a living magisterium, which is connected to tradition. There's sacred scripture and there's sacred tradition. The Protestant Christians only have the dusty old book that they rely on.
You're a fundamentalist?
I'm Catholic.
Fundamentalist Catholic?
I don't know what that means.
Okay.
I'm a Catholic.
You take everything in the Bible as literal fact.
There's no error in the Bible and there's no contradiction in the Bible in terms of faith and morals. Of course, there's plenty of stuff in the Bible like people doing the wrong thing, people making mistakes, and just people being people, But in terms of faith and morals, there's no error. Now,
Well, I do think morals and behavior 2,000 years ago was a lot different to today. Absolutely, entirely different.
There are differences. There are also similarities. The sort of level of historical and cultural knowledge that you would need to assess some of these stories is beyond our capability. So there is a certain amount of ignorance that we have when faced with the problems of interpretation, and there are layers and layers of meaning. So there's a lot of freedom. There's more freedom actually in biblical interpretation than you'd probably think. We have a living church, which means that they have a lot of stuff that was handed on orally and that's not written, and that gets passed along down to the present day.
Sounds like Chinese whispers.
Yeah, that's why we need infallibility, because otherwise, what happens with Chinese whispers?
That's my point.
Yeah. Without divine protection, it's impossible that the truth will be maintained for 2,000 years plus, right?
So there is divine protection.
There is divine protection.
How do you know that?
Because the church tells me. The church tells me that it's infallible. Before we get too deep into my leap of faith, I'd like to talk a little bit about your leap of faith. Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, I don't have a leap of faith.
Yes, you do. The leap of faith that you take is into what the philosophers called naive realism.
Okay.
Naive realism is, well, yeah, the world is real. Of course, the other is real. Of course, my mother is real. My father is real. My dog is real. My cat's real. There's absolutely no scientific basis for that. It's not a scientific conclusion. It is a leap of faith. There is absolutely no scientific basis for believing in the other and in the real world. The only thing, you can doubt your senses, can you not?
Yes.
Have you ever dreamt dreams?
Yeah.
All you can talk about is your senses, but that's what's being questioned.
Our senses are a function of our brain.
How do you know that you have a brain?
Because I'm alive. For example, with my own brother, who's having his first baby boy, and I'm very excited to be an uncle in a few months, they can watch as his body develops inside his fiance's womb.
But they're watching with their senses. That's my point. You have heard through your ears that you have a brain. You've seen textbooks with your eyes that say you have a brain. You've also seen with your eyes pictures of this alleged brain. Maybe you've licked a brain if you if you had the opportunity. I don't know. Maybe you've tasted brains.
Well, I have touched brains before.
You touch brains
in anatomy labs, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have lots and lots of sensory so-called evidence, right? But you can't affirm the evidence of your senses on the basis of your senses. That is absurd.
There's a very funny comic which is a picture of someone's brain, and at the top it says, "The brain is the most important part of the body." At the bottom it says, "according to the brain." So it's like it's a loop, right? The brain's like, protect me, I'm the most important one because I can think.
Circular reasoning.
Yeah, absolutely it is. But it's a very true comic. But the thing is, we are so intelligent. We near infinitely intelligent. If you're telling me that if you cut open someone's head, and there might be a chance that they have no brain,
that's what I'm saying.
Wrong.
Have you seen The Truman Show?
Yes.
Okay, so there's this idea that it's all a lie. And you know what solipsism is. So what solipsism is not a human that has a brain and a head and a neck and a torso and four limbs. It's not a biological human that says, hey, I'm the only one. No, it's a disembodied existence that has a fantasy that life entails a biological component. For the Buddhist, only the mind is real, the mind of Buddha, the one mind. Separation is an illusion. That's one of the causes of suffering. We have to escape suffering, so we have to get beyond this illusion of separateness. Let's go to reality. What is reality? There's one mind, the mind of Buddha. And that one mind has this fragmented dream, and those fragments, which we call Alex and David and Betty and Sue, those fragments are suffering, and it's needless. Let's go back to the one mind. Let's get back integrated. And that, to me, is indistinguishable from solipsism. Solipsism says, there's one mind. It's my mind. I am the one. I am God. You know, and there is no heaven and hell for the solipsist. There's no heaven and hell for the Buddhist. Ultimately, there's only God, and therefore there's only heaven. There is no morality. There is no consequence, no lasting consequence, no real consequence to any of the choices that we make. So my point with talking to you about Buddhism is to say that, look, we're all in the same boat. You have a worldview. You have a story. Oh, of course the brain's real. I went to the morgue and I cut his head off and I saw his brain. But the Buddhists have a story too. And the Catholics have a story too. And it's all based on that initial question. What is real and what is not?
Which one is more evidence? Which story?
What is evidence? That's the question. Because for the Buddhists, for the Buddhists, that's all part of the show. That's all part of the grand illusion.
That doesn't count as scientific evidence, though.
What are you talking about? Scientific evidence is precisely part of the separation illusion that is part of suffering that they want to escape from. The Buddhist wants to escape from science because science is part of that seduction into, hey, the real world is real. Look, look at the corpse. Can you smell the death? Can you touch the brains? Look, this is reality, right? And they're saying, oh my God, I'm getting seduced into the dark side and into, I almost want to believe that it's real because this atheist, secular Western man is showing me a corpse and it's so overwhelming. It seems real.
Yes.
So they need to go back and center and meditate and say, that was all just illusion. That's all just separation. That's all just the source of suffering.
Okay. They're just making up their mind about something that's wrong. The real world exists. It does, period.
It's self-evident for you.
It should be self-evident for everybody, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So, do you believe in evolution?
I believe in certain kinds of evolution. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Pope agrees with evolution, so...
The church hasn't come down on a really hard stance on it. They're open about it.
Okay.
I'm skeptical. But the church is very adamant that there's no contradiction possible in principle. There's no contradiction possible between faith and reason, between science and religion.
What about the Bible?
There's no contradiction possible. If there's an apparent contradiction, it has to be resolved. Well, it doesn't have to be resolved, but in principle, it is resolvable.
Well, what about the first few words, God created everything?
I believe that.
But that is in conflict with science.
How so?
You've heard of the Big Bang Theory?
Yeah, that's a Catholic priest that came up with that theory. Do we assume that there is a rational explanation for that? Or do we just say, oh, it just happened? What's the more scientific attitude?
Well, rational.
Yeah.
Right?
There must be a sufficient cause to explain that. It doesn't just happen, right? You don't believe in the supernatural.
No.
You believe in the natural.
Absolutely.
So you believe that what's taking place in your mind is the natural effect of the natural causes going back in a chain all the way to that first cause. And that first cause is uncaused, and that first cause is what we call God.
Wow. Yeah, that was a huge leap. But what I'm thinking is what 95% of scientists agree with, that something like Big Bang happened.
Yeah.
Right? And that's where the matter came from.
Oh, you think there's a scientific explanation for where all matter came from? You really believe that?
The Big Bang Theory, yes.
You think that the Big Bang Theory posits an explanation for how something came from nothing? You're the first person I've met who ever believed that.
All independent scientists have said, yes, everything came from this one point here, but what they're trying to do now is determine how that happened, and that's where quantum physics has also come in. Lawrence Krauss, he's got a book called Something from Nothing, like how we can get something from nothing.
Quantum fluctuations.
Which is a beautiful thing to study in science.
Do you know, by the way, that quantum fields are not nothing?
I haven't researched.
If I told you that there's a quantum field and that in that quantum field, when the conditions are right, particles can arise. Do you see the quantum field as nothing, or do you see it as something?
I don't know. I don't know.
I know. I know that a quantum field is not nothing. I know that. You know how I know it?
You're a quantum physicist?
Well, I studied quantum physics at the university,
Sure.
but that's not the reason I know it. I know it as just as a rational 8th grader. I know that A quantum field is not nothing. A cornfield is not nothing. An electromagnetic field is not nothing.
Right.
These are not nothing. They're not nothing. You don't need a PhD to understand that. A quantum field is not nothing.
I've never heard of the term quantum field before.
Well, this is where something comes from nothing, quote unquote, for the new atheists. They're desperate to find an explanation for how something came from nothing. Why? Because they don't want God. So they have to have a scientific explanation. The problem is that there is no scientific explanation because it's not a scientific question. The domain of science doesn't permit asking that question. We only deal with the stuff once it's here. We start with that thing that expands, and this is how it expands, and this is what we observe, and this and that, the other thing.
Right.
But it's a philosophical religious question, how it got there from nothing. And to posit a quantum field as nothing is completely dishonest.
Well, what gives you the right to say it's not scientific? It's the same thing as me saying, you know what, it's only science. It's nothing to do with philosophy or religion at all.
What is science? Tell me what science is, and I'll let you answer your own question.
What is science?
What is science?
It's the sampling and collection of data that when trial and repeated, you get the same results.
What is data?
Well, I don't think I need to explain what data is. Information that we've gathered through doing experiments.
Would you consider nothing data? By definition, there is no data in nothing. There is no data there. It's outside the realm of science because science deals with...
Why is it inside the realm of philosophy? There's nothing there. Why do you...
Because philosophy transcends science. Philosophy is a higher science than the physical sciences. In your worldview, is natural science the highest science?
I mean, natural science.
Or the most...
All sciences are natural.
There's no social science?
Well, that science, sure, that's a different science.
When you think about mathematics and you think about music,
sure,
is one subordinate to the other, yes or no?
Oh God, who knows? I don't think we can determine that.
Yeah, we know for a fact that music derives its principles from mathematics. We know that. It's the same thing with biology and physics. Which one is higher? Which one's the higher science, biology or physics?
They say that chemistry is applied physics and biology is applied chemistry, even that.
Yeah, so there's a hierarchy. There's a hierarchy in the sciences, right? So this is my point. And above the natural sciences is philosophy. And above philosophy is theology. And above theology is God Almighty. What are the exceptions to cause and effect, and how are they scientific for you?
This is not something that atheists have to think about.
I'm asking you to think about it.
Right.
Because the reason I'm asking you to think about it is because it leads you to believing in God. And if you don't want to believe in God, then don't think about it. But if you're open-minded, if you're skeptical, then just find a reasonable answer to my question. Right. It doesn't have to be today. It could be in 10 years from now. But think about it and find out, is everything 100% determined by natural cause and effect or not? And if you say not, then you're introducing the supernatural by definition.
Can I do what my body allows me to do? Yes.
But it's all obeying the principle of natural cause and effect.
Well, it's obeying biological science.
Yeah, and there's no exception. You're not violating any of the laws of biology, chemistry, physics, or any other science.
Sure, let's go on to the next point. And let's just say yes.
So you agree. So you're a hard determinist. You don't believe in real freedom. There's just the illusion of freedom.
No. I can simulate these nerves whenever I want to.
So you don't think there's a cause?
There is a cause, yeah.
Gives rise to that decision to...
I didn't say there wasn't a cause, no.
Okay, so there is a natural cause. So that's my point.
Okay, so Adam and Eve, what's with that?
The church obliges us to believe that we descend from one human couple.
That's preposterous. If we all had to inbreed from two people, we would have died out years ago. That's what would have happened. We would have got all those bad traits because we have a higher chance of getting bad traits, and we would have died off a couple of generations in. Right, so that view is ridiculous, and it's unscientific and impossible.
Can I ask you a simple question in general about science? Has science ever corrected itself? In other words, they thought something was true and then they discovered that there was more nuance and that they were wrong?
All the time.
Okay, so in principle, you're willing to admit that maybe you're not 100% certain about your argument that we can't come from one human pair?
No. Science has come a long way in the past 100 years. Now we have the tools which we didn't have in the past.
What percentage of certainty do you have that we don't come from one human pair?
It's 100%.
Approaching 100 or really 100?
I've already said 100. There is simply no way.
That doesn't seem scientific to me. It doesn't seem skeptical to me.
It is, right, because there is no way you can have the genetic diversity we have today from just two human beings.
That's what you keep saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
There was no possible way.
Yeah, you're 100% certain. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's simply impossible. And you have to present your argument in ways that can be scientifically proven, which they can't be. Science has never proven God. For example, where did God come from?
He's uncaused.
Convenient.
It's not convenient. You have to admit that there is a first cause and uncaused cause. You have to admit that. Because you admitted reluctantly and ambiguously that everything is natural cause and effect. And that if you go back and back and back and back and back and back, there are two alternatives. It can keep going infinitely, or there's a first cause which is itself uncaused, from which all the other cause and effects flow, right? That chain of cause and effect has to hang on a first cause which is uncaused. That is what we call God, and you have to admit that that is necessary, because if you deny it, in denying it, you're positing that there's an infinite chain of cause and effect, which is untenable because of entropy, because we're approaching heat death, and a finite amount of time will accomplish that heat death, and therefore, if there's an infinite amount of time behind us, which you would have to posit to say that there's an infinite chain of cause and effect, right?
Well, I haven't said that at all.
Good, so you've acknowledged the first cause, which is the God that I worship.
I never said anything about the first cause.
Well, you just did. You said it's not an infinite chain of cause and effect. Therefore, there's a first cause. It's either there's a first cause or there's not a first cause. And if there's not a first cause, it's an infinite chain of cause and effect.
So why do 95% of scientists agree that something similar to the Big Bang happened?
I believe in the Big Bang.
So God exists and he created the Big Bang?
Yeah, God created the universe, and the universe that we live in...
How do you know that?
Because otherwise I would have to posit an infinite chain of cause and effect.
Why?
And that's untenable. Because every effect has a cause. And if we say this effect was caused by this, and that in turn was the effect of the thing that came before it, either that goes on infinitely back in time, or there's a first cause. And that first cause is what we call God. And if you deny that there's a first cause, then you are necessarily, logically saying that there's an infinite chain of cause and effect, and that is logically untenable. It leads to contradiction. Therefore, we reject it. Therefore, we admit there's a first cause, and that's what we call God.
So I had a friend once, and she was sexually active in high school, right? And good on her. She went to a very Catholic high school. And when her parents thought that she was having sex in high school, they put her in a circle of people at church and cast the demons out of her verbally, which I think is child abuse. Imagine having these urges as a young woman, right? You've been told your entire life to suppress these because you're part of the Catholic faith. But these natural biological urges that you feel to help your species reproduce, and that's what our function is in life, is to reproduce, you want to have sex with every guy. But then your parents shame you, and then you're in a circle of people, and they think there's a demon inside you that is beyond immoral to a young girl who has just gone through puberty and wants to have sex because she's a human being. And it's one of the problems of faith, which is sexual suppression. Insane sexual repression. People get married too quickly because they want to have sex as early as they can. And here you have religion telling them to do the exact opposite.
As a Catholic, I view the world as fallen, which means that we were made perfect in the perfect paradise of Garden of Eden.
So am I evil then? Am I fallen?
You're good by nature, evil by choice, just like everyone else.
Did the sin pass through Adam's semen, which is actually what they think happened?
No, I don't think it passes through the semen. I actually never heard that.
Well, how would it get into the baby?
It's a supernatural thing.
Supernatural, so it can't be scientifically.
It's supernatural,
evaluated.
and I suspect you believe in the supernatural too, but you just haven't admitted it to me. But that's okay.
It's supernatural. It's outside of the natural world.
Above. I like to think about it like when I program a video game. You go on my website and you play my little game, and there are interactions, and you have a certain amount of freedom that you can do. You make choices, and you can get results, and you can get points and stuff like that, okay? But as the programmer, I have a lot of power and a lot of freedom. So that's how I think about God and the supernatural in relation to his creation. God can like make it a little exception, and I can walk through the wall, and I can fly in the air, and I can walk on water, and I can raise you from the dead, and I can do all this sort of stuff because he's at that higher level, you know, just like the programmer with the game. And there's a perfectly reasonable explanation, but it's a higher order, it's a higher level than most people when they're playing the game. They don't get to experience that because it's like the programmer did some trick, you know? So that's the supernatural. It's not some kind of anti-science thing. No, God is the source of science, but he's above science and he can make these little exceptions, you know? So I just wanted to clarify that about the supernatural.
Okay. I think all that's BS, but sure. As expected.
Now, I just wanted to talk a little bit about Catholicism and sexuality. Do you have any questions about it?
No, I abhor most of the views that they have on sexuality.
Can you give me an example?
Well, for one, no sex before marriage. I think it's abhorrent.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I don't know what to say in response. I think it's a wholesome and healthy doctrine that protects the family. How do you see family?
Well, they're probably the best way that a kid can grow up.
Basic education before they go off to school, stuff like that. You would agree that there's all that opportunity for growth, protection, love.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's deeply and intimately connected to all of the church's teachings about family and about sexuality. Everything that you love and cherish about family, the church is fighting for you to have more of that in society. And it's not popular. Why? Because like you said, biology, we have instincts and we want to reproduce. We want to do it. But
we sure do.
First of all, there's this thing called self-control, and there's this thing called reason. And we can't just indulge every urge that we have. We can't. On the other hand, I have to admit that we live in a fallen world and that we're not marrying as young as we used to, and that creates a lot of tension and a lot of problems. And we have problems with our education system, we have problems with our families, we have all kinds of problems. And nightmare scenarios arise where little girls are getting these fake exorcisms or whatever they are, and people maybe have good intentions, maybe they don't, but it ain't working out too well for that kid, you know? She's traumatized, she could be messed up for life, she could end up killing herself. So I admit that there are all kinds of ways to go wrong. And a lot of that can be blamed on the sinners in the church. For example, the pedophile priests.
Sure.
They weren't living up to the high standards that they signed up for.
They weren't real Catholics.
There could be two pedophile priests. One could be repentant in his heart, and one doesn't think he did anything wrong.
See, he's either going to be a Catholic or he's not a Catholic. So which one is he?
God only knows. But the duck test is, do I believe what the church proposes for my belief? Do I pray with the church and as the church proposes that I pray? Do I follow the 10 commandments and the moral teachings of the church? In principle, am I in agreement with them and do I strive to follow them? With those 3 check marks, I can say with confidence, 100% confidence, that I'm a Catholic.
How did you pick your particular sect of Christianity?
Well, I had studied the history of the church, and so I had already come to the conclusion as an enemy of Christianity.
Well, why aren't you a Mormon?
Because I know the history of the church and I'd already come to the conclusion as an atheist, as an enemy of Christianity, that Christianity is Catholicism and that everything else is a departure from that. Mormonism is a departure from a departure from a departure.
So is Mormonism complete bullshit?
There's truth in everything. This is one of the Catholic teachings, is that evil does not exist. Evil is the deprivation of the good.
It's like cold. Cold doesn't exist. It's just
lack of heat.
Lack of heat. Right.
And when you have a healthy apple and you compare it with the rotten apple, you see the rotten one and it's almost like a bite's been taken out of it by those bacteria, by the worms, by everything else. And that is a good image of the evil. The evil is like a parasite on the good, and it's a lack of good. And the apple itself is good. And it's the same thing with health and sickness. Health is the positive. Sickness is a lack of health. And like you said, with heat and cold, it's the same sort of thing. So that's a basic principle of Catholic philosophy. Okay. Now, maybe could I ask you some general questions about religion? Like, do you have a favorite religion? I know you probably don't, but...
I've always thought Buddhism, because I'm like, oh, they're very neutral. But did some research, they have done killings before in the name of Buddhism. So it's like, well, that religion's shit now, right? Because they've killed in the name of a god. Comparatively, I don't think there's been any atheists who have killed someone because there isn't a god. Like, in the name of there being no God.
Yeah. Communism has killed more people than...
Yeah, but I don't think that's been in the name because there is no God, right?
Yeah, it is.
I don't believe so.
Yeah.
I'll look into it. I don't believe you're right, but I'll look into it.
Yeah, it's...
Well, they kill people because they say, there's no God, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah, because it's a social engineering. Let's just clean the slate and let's do it right. This is killing in the name of atheistic materialism. It's always the case. This is built into the philosophy of socialism and communism. It's built into it.
I'm an atheist. I've never heard of atheistic materialism before.
Let's talk about your death. What is the best case scenario?
That every single one of my organs can go to other people to help them survive.
That's the best case scenario?
How is that not the best case scenario? Yeah.
You can't think of anything better?
What's better than helping human lives?
Eternal joy, fulfillment, bliss, pleasure, everything you could possibly want, and more. Right. How do you compare that scenario with your scenario? You're annihilated and a couple of people get your organs. Right. Which one's better?
My one, of course.
Why?
Because I get to help humanity.
But I can too. I have what you have and then more. So which do you prefer, given the fact that I have what you have and then more?
If you see a loved one down in hell, you're not going to be happy, you're going to be sad.
You're not going to be sad looking down at the people in hell.
What if my brother's there?
Every person in hell chose to go to hell. Okay, it's the choice of the individual. It's not God saying, you're good, you're bad, you come, you go, It's the choice of the individual. If you either love God and you say yes to God and you go to Him.
How do you possibly know that?
The church teaches me that. And
Well, don't believe everything the church tells you.
Well, it's a choice. I can either believe or not believe. I choose to believe, right?
Yeah.
This is the leap of faith.
Yeah.
To go to God because He's everything that's good. He's the source of everything that's good. I think it's a natural choice. I'm surprised that you don't acknowledge...
I don't like God. I think He's a dick. That's why I don't want to go to His heaven.
Let's talk about God for a little bit. What is it you don't like about God?
Okay, well, one, I don't hate Him because He doesn't exist, right? But if He did exist, then He's the one giving us cancer.
He's not the source of any evil.
Oh, well, that's
He's
convenient.
not the source of any evil. It's
Again.
not convenient. It's by definition. He is all good.
Who made the sun?
God.
Who made our DNA?
God made us
God, right?
perfect in the perfect Garden of Eden, and when we fell from grace, we suddenly now we have
What is falling from grace?
disobeying God, and then there are consequences: death, disease, war, strife, selfishness, anger.
Well, I'm disobeying God right
Sex
now,
abuse.
so why is none of that happening to me?
There is stuff happening to you.
Like what? I don't see anything happen to me right now.
Well, do you only believe in what you can see? When you rebel against God, when you willingly decide to do the wrong thing, you're choosing a lesser good. Like, you know what the good thing is to do, but you make a more selfish choice, right? There's damage being done to you when you do that. And do you know about karma in Hinduism?
Yes.
It's a real thing.
It's not a real thing.
It's a real
at all.
thing.
How do you know?
It's cause and effect.
I don't believe that at all.
Of course you do.
No.
You stick your finger in the fire, what happens?
Well, yes, you get burnt.
It's cause and effect. That's karma.
If that's what you define karma as,
Yeah.
then sure. But karma, in the sense that I've learned to believe it, is if you do something bad happened to you later. If you do something good will happen to you later.
That's what I just said. If you
why is
stick
it-
your hand in the fire,
Doing that is just because I'm an idiot. Right? That is not bad. That is just me sticking my hand in boiling water and getting burnt. If that's what you define karma as, then I guess that's karma in your point of view, sure.
it's just cause and effect. So I'm using a very concrete, simple example where it's just you and a flame and you choose to do something stupid and you pay the price immediately. But there are lots of situations where you're like, oh, I have a sexual urge and I'm going to act on it even though it's taboo. It may not be an immediate punishment, quote unquote, like when you stick your finger in the flame. It may take years for that to manifest on
How do you know the two are linked then? At all?
In principle, I know it.
God created the sun, right? He also created humans and DNA. So why did He make the sun negatively affect our DNA such that it caused mutations?
It didn't originally.
So mankind did it to themselves?
Yeah.
What did Adam and Eve do that was so bad that it would unnecessarily doom the rest of mankind with this plague called cancer?
It's not unnecessary.
What did they do that was so bad?
There's nothing unnecessary. There's a perfectly reasonable explanation for everything, good and bad, that happens. Everything. There's nothing happening by accident. There's nothing random. And everything that happens to you, good and bad, there's a perfectly reasonable explanation for all of it, and it all makes sense. And it's all God's grace. All the good stuff is God's grace.
Right.
And all the bad stuff comes from sin. Original sin, your actual sin, your parents' actual sin, your grandparents' actual sin, it's all fitting together in this jigsaw puzzle perfectly. And when you go to heaven, and I hope you do, and I think you will, you'll see all of that, how it fits together beautifully, magically, and how you had freedom, and at the same time, everything fits perfectly into place.
What if I'm in heaven and I see a 10-year-old who died because she was hit by a car or something? Why did she get hit by a car? Why did God allow that to happen?
Because He can bring good out of it. That's the reason why God allows evil.
So my mother dying was a good thing?
From God's perspective, yeah.
From your
objectively.
I don't care about God. Your perspective.
I acknowledge the subjective depth of sorrow and the heaviness of the evils of the world. I acknowledge it as a human being. I also acknowledge that whatever happens is good. There's a dividing line between the past and the future, and we're in the now. And this applies also to sin. When we look at the future, we should not want to fall into temptation. But once we do, it's too late. There's no point in building a complex about it. Forget it. It's done. Go to confession and move on. You don't need to build it into some kind of a big deal. It's not a big deal.
Yeah. A murderer, could he get forgiven?
If he's repentant.
Ah, that fixed it.
But
the dead person is back to life now. Everything's all good with the world.
No, the consequences continue. This is karma.
There are no consequences. Consequences are good, according to you.
Evil is not good, but evil is not a thing, right? It's a lack of good. But in the big story from God's point of view, it's all playing out just as it should. And once that murderer repents and gets forgiven, it's done. But there are still consequences that need to play out. You know, he's still going to suffer because of it.
I mean, I hope he does. I hope he, yeah.
Well, I mean,
certainly hope
it's pretty natural, isn't it? Like, I mean, you stick your
It's
finger
called
in the fire, you get burned.
justice system, and he goes to jail.
Justice is a real thing.
Yeah.
And I think we should talk about justice, because in my worldview, justice is perfectly achieved. In your worldview, is justice achieved? Is that balance achieved perfectly, as in my worldview?
It's a very complex issue, and it's one that we should not derive from biblical sources. It's one that we should derive from talking rationally with a group of people. There's no karma, there's no fate, there's no ultimate thing that means everything will go back to just.
No.
Right?
There's no mechanism to punish the guilty and to reward the good.
No, absolutely not.
So let's talk about someone that you probably look down on as some kind of sick, perverted monster criminal, okay?
Sure.
He has engineered in a very genius, clever way his whole life so that he appears to be a saint and a hero and the pillar of the community, while at the same time secretly hiding every evidence that would expose the fact that he's deriving all kinds of sexual pleasure,
Sure.
power, domination pleasure. So he's getting all the stuff that we want: pleasure, money,
Right.
power, fame, reputation, love from the family and from the community. He's getting everything that we want, and a lot more than you're getting out of your life, and a lot more than I'm getting out of my life. And he lives a long life. He dies quietly in his bed at night, and without God and without objective morality, it's kind of hard to argue with the choices that this creature made, because he can read Darwin too, and he could say, you know what? This is fascinating. I believe it or I don't believe it, doesn't matter. I'm going to do what I want to do anyway.
Sure. Right, so I think this is easy. So I say he's a monster. It's easy. What do you say about him?
You say he's a monster. That's just sour grapes. He's living the dream. He has maximized his pleasure in all kinds of ways that you never even dreamed of. Like, I mean, you have never tasted the pleasures this guy's had.
Well, he sounds like he doesn't have a conscience at all.
You do respect your conscience. You do respect it, because you basically
Sure.
you're a good Christian boy.
I do a lot of things that God would hate, especially not believing in him.
You're a mixed bag, like all of us.
No, I'm not the same as you. No, don't put us all in. We are not in the same bag here. We are nowhere near in the same bag. No. I know you think that you're ridden with mistakes and faults.
Yeah.
But you're not, right? So stop looking down at yourself. That's one thing I hate about religions.
I view myself as a love slave of God.
But don't you feel derogatory that you think you're a slave?
No, well, there's a
But
sort...
you can see how I think that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a danger. It's a danger to undervalue myself in the wrong way.
Yes.
But there's another way where it's impossible to undervalue myself, because I am absolutely nothing and I'm completely dependent on God for everything that's good.
I think that's very sad.
But it's just reality.
Why are you dependent on God for everything? You walk.
It's just
you
reality.
walk to the store when you need milk. You depend on the store
every
when you
breath,
need
every
milk.
heartbeat is a gift from God.
No, it's a gift from your muscles and your nerves.
Even Jesus says of himself, I'm not a man, I'm a worm. God Almighty emptied himself and became human in all things, in
Weird.
all weaknesses, except for sin.
Very weird.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, I mean, like, it makes no sense at all.
It's the incarnation.
Oh, sorry, makes all the sense now. Sorry, I should have known. Yeah.
Bing!
I got a question for you. Is God a man?
No. The second person incarnated as a man.
Right, but there are many people who would claim that God's a man.
God the Father's not a man.
Go argue with other Christians then.
That's what the radio show's for.
Absolutely.
Catholic versus Catholic, Catholic versus Protestant.
Don't you think it's a problem that many different religious sects have different opinions?
Why do people have different opinions about everything? It's because we're ignorant. There's one truth, right?
Well, when it comes to the Bible, it's thousands of years old, written by different
Yeah,
people.
but who interprets it? That's the question. Is there an authority? Is there an infallible authority that can tell you the interpretation of certain passages? Or not? If there is, then we have divine protection. If there's not, then it's just human opinion. It's your opinion against mine. That's Protestantism.
Why aren't you a Muslim?
They say Jesus was Muslim, he didn't die on the cross. There's plenty of evidence that he did die on the cross. They say that the Christian writings are fabrications and corruptions of the true teachings of Islam. So there's this sort of rewriting of history. It's just too much to believe as a scientific, skeptical person.
I wouldn't call you a scientific skeptic if you believe the things you do believe about God. You are dirty in the name of scientific skepticism if that's what you think you are.
Well, I'm very skeptical of science.
You're a skeptic of science. You're not a skeptic of religion and supernatural
I also
things,
am skeptical of Catholicism. Are there things that you believe which, at the same time that you believe it, you're also watching and waiting for the possibility that you might be wrong so you can change your mind? Yes or no?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's how I am with Christianity.
Right.
If you read The Death of Socrates, I think you'll understand my Christian perspective better. He was going to his death, and he had in principle this idea that God is one, God is not many. That's why they killed him, because they considered him an atheist, because he wouldn't worship the many gods of the state. He believed on principle that the good man cannot be harmed by evil. And those who unjustly condemned him and killed him were harming not him, but themselves.
Why is it unjust if everything's good?
There is a lack of justice in this fallen world. I've never denied that. But he rose above it because he saw the light of God, and he knew that virtue is all that matters. His goodness, his clinging to the good, is not tarnished in any way by the fact that he was unjustly tried and killed by the people of Athens. It was in no way tarnished by that. And that's why his story resonates with me as a Christian. It's very similar.
No, see, I'm more into scientific evidence, and I don't really care about the differences between good and evil. I really don't. I think that doesn't get me anywhere closer towards believing in not just a deity, which is already a huge claim, and as we know, huge claims require extraordinary evidence, but your particular deity, which is distinct from the deity of all the other major religions.
When I talk about the God of Judaism and the God of Islam and the God of Christianity, to me, they're one and the same, and the distinctions that are made are false distinctions.
So Muhammad didn't get talked to by Archangel Gabriel?
Not according to Christianity, no.
Well, how did Christianity know? Because that book was written 600 years before the Quran was written.
Yeah, but I'm not a Bible-alone Christian. I'm not a Protestant. I'm a Catholic. I have the living voice of the church. I have an infallible Pope today, Pope Francis, who is teaching me today what the church teaches.
But it sounds like the Quran has 600 years more on the death of Jesus Christ.
Well, there's a new religion.
So why isn't that the new updated 2.0 Christianity?
Because the truth is eternal and unchanging.
Yes, but the determination.
You acknowledge that?
Determine. Yeah, I would say so.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it doesn't aid to your arguments.
That's God, by the way.
God's truth?
Yeah.
What does that mean? They're just words.
That
what does that freaking mean?
Was it just words when you said truth is eternal? Was that just words, or?
Yeah, sure. Yes.
Oh, it was just words.
Sure.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
It's just words.
And now we're still sitting here on my table, and we still haven't got anywhere closer towards their thinking that it's God.
That eternal truth that you believe in, that's God.
Of course I don't believe in that. That's ridiculous.
No, you just told me that you do believe it. You believe in that.
I believe if something is true, then it's true.
Yeah.
That's
eternal.
Period.
Independent of space and time.
Well, I mean, it's weird, because if I ask what's the current Prime Minister of Australia, I'll say Malcolm Turnbull. In 10 years' time, if you ask me the same question, who's the Prime Minister of Australia, it'll be a different answer.
Yeah, but I view it as one great big piece, and if you look at life like a film strip, the truth of that frame is still there, even though we're 10 frames over, you know? From God's point of view, he's outside of time, so he sees everything at once, and he sees all the succession of popes, all the succession of prime ministers, all the succession of humans.
The deaths of innocent people.
Innocent people?
Yeah, innocent people. Is that not a thing too?
There is innocence, but there's also a lack of innocence.
Sure, I mean, that's true, right?
Yeah.
I would say I'm generally innocent. A murderer is not innocent, right?
There's a mixture in everybody.
Right. But so
there is innocence in the murderer, by the way.
Wishy-washy. So if someone dies of cystic fibrosis at the age of 20, right, then that's okay with you.
I accept reality.
Do you know how somebody gets cystic fibrosis or any genetic condition? It's simply due to genetic recombination of the two gametes, the egg and the sperm, that happen when they collide. There's no original sin in that baby. Don't give me that bullshit.
This is the most self-evident doctrine in all of Christianity, original sin. How do you explain the evils of the world? Come on. You have to admit, it's not perfect here, and it seems pretty messed up with the disease and young people dying and randomly.
Yeah, so why doesn't God just fix it?
He could, and he doesn't. And because we have this principle that he's all good and he's incapable of evil, we conclude that there must be a good reason why he doesn't, and that there's something even better.
What about like Leviticus, where it says, if a man lies with another man, he should be stoned? Do you believe that?
No.
Why not? You're contradicting the word of God.
No, I'm not a Bible-alone Christian. I have a living church. I don't know how many times I got to tell you this.
Do you believe in everything that God does?
What do you mean? Do I believe in everything that God does? Of course.
Do you believe that
I do.
everything in the world exists because of God?
God is not the source of anything evil. God is the source of everything that's good.
So God isn't the source of everything then? No.
He's the source of everything that is. But as I keep telling you,
Sure.
evil is not. So God is the source
Well, that's
of...
your definition of evil. I'm sure people would see it more like this, you know.
Yeah, and that evil is a thing. It's a substance. That they're like Gnosticism. Gnosticism teaches that there's good and there's evil. Whereas Christianity teaches that there's good and then there's the deprivation or the lack of good.
So you believe in the Old Testament?
Of course.
So is everything in the Old Testament correct?
There is no error and there is no contradiction in
Right.
the Old Testament. God is the primary author of the Old Testament.
Right.
And it is...
What about the New Testament?
That too.
So when I asked you before, you lied to me. So when I asked you before...
I didn't lie.
Yeah, Leviticus, right?
There's nuance that you don't appreciate, which I haven't explained yet.
Nuance, which I don't give a shit about. But so in Leviticus, when it says if a man lies with another man, he should be stoned.
Yeah.
Before you said, no, I don't believe in everything the Bible has to say, but now you say it has no error. So is it morally acceptable to stone gay people?
No. And let me explain why.
It better be good.
It is good.
Good.
So Jesus was talking to the Jews of the day, and he gave a Sermon on the Mount, and he said, you have heard it said in the old law, X, but I tell you Y. You have heard this, but I tell you that. So there's an augmentation and a progression of the teaching, right?
Replacement?
No, there's no replacement. He said, I didn't come to replace the law, I came to perfect the law.
Right.
A Jew asked him, a faithful Jew asked him, why did Moses allow divorce? Because Jesus was preaching against divorce. And Jesus said, Moses made a concession because you're a stiff-necked people, because you're a stubborn, difficult people, and he made a concession to you. So the truth contained in the Bible addresses apparent contradictions in doctrinal teachings, for example, in the Old Testament with Moses allowing divorce. So it's a lot more subtle than just saying, hey, Leviticus says stone the gay people, so you should do that. No, Jesus would say, look, you're missing the whole point.
Did he say that though? Did he condemn that passage?
He did have a situation where there was a woman caught in adultery,
Yes.
and the law says to stone her. And he said, the first one without sin, come and throw the first stone. That's all he said. So he was confronted with the letter of the law from the Old Testament, and what was his reaction? He didn't participate in that letter of the law. He didn't. He was without sin. He could have picked up a stone and stoned her, but he didn't do that. He said, have any of these men condemned you? Because they all walked away, right? And she said no, and he said, neither do I condemn you. Now go and sin no more. And it's all recorded in the Bible. And when you come as an outsider and you say, well, this weird thing's in the Bible, you must believe it, and you're inconsistent if you don't believe it, you're not looking at the big picture. You're not looking at the whole Bible. You're not looking at the words of Jesus Christ, and you're not looking at who he is from a Christian perspective.
So let's say that I had sex with a man here, and Jesus came down and said, I don't condemn you, but go and sin no more.
Yeah.
Don't tell me what to do, who to be.
I'm a thief by nature. If he comes and tells me, David, I don't condemn you, but don't steal anymore, I won't say, well, who are you? I mean, I have these impulses and I'm going to respond to them because that's natural. I can say yes to the impulse or I can say no to the impulse.
Yeah.
Just like when I see the hot secretary at work, I can say, look, I'm married. Should I do this or not? Lots of justification possible, right? It's like, hey, I was drunk and she was wearing this and whatever, the music, it was natural. It's just what we're made for. Biology, Darwin. It's the wrong choice. Sorry. Don't say yes to those impulses.
So he would tell me to stop
Suck it
having
up.
sex with men.
Yeah, I'm telling you that right now. Stop having sex with men if you're having sex with men.
Not a problem. Their biology says, I want to have sex with my own sex.
Yeah, but my biology says I want to have sex with the secretary, but I'm married to my wife. There's lots of temptations.
Yes, and you could.
Yeah.
You could if you wanted to.
It's the wrong thing to do.
But these people want to. You don't want to.
They're free to.
They desire to, right? These are the people that they want to have sex with. And your holy book says that is a sin.
But they don't believe the holy book, and they're free to do what they want. In your heart, what do you value more? God's way or your way? It's God's way or your way. And what's the easier choice? To do your will or to God's will? What do you think? Which one's easier?
Your will. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But can a gay person be a good Catholic if they're gay?
Yeah.
But they're going
plenty
against
of
what
them.
the book says.
If they don't have a choice, then there's no sin in that state of being a homosexual. Now, acting on it is a different question, and I don't know how many times I need to repeat that.
Yeah, but I can't get over that you think someone acting on their homosexual impulses is a bad thing.
Because...
No, do you think it's a bad thing?
Of course. What is freedom? Is it license to do what you want, what your impulses, your animal instincts, your desires? What is the highest freedom for you?
Being able to punch you in the face right now. I mean, that's pretty free, right? But why? Why do you ask?
Well, because my religion is all about freedom, right? It's like, because God is freedom. You know, God is truth, God is love, God is justice, God is beauty, God is all the perfections.
God is Vegemite. God is 7. He is also 11 and 12.
No, all of his perfections are perfections which it is better to have than to not have. It's better, I think you will admit, that it's better to have freedom than to not have freedom. It's better to be just, it's better to be good, it's better to be beautiful, it's better to be holy. So he is all those perfections, but he's not a circle. Because even though a circle is perfect, it's not better to be a circle than not to be a circle. Now, can we exhaustively say what God is? No. We can't, because he's a mystery, he's beyond understanding, he will never be fully comprehended by mere creatures. But we can talk about God. We can talk about God in a poetic way, we can talk about God through analogy, we can talk about what God isn't and sort of sculpt out what he is by saying what he isn't.
You can talk about him while you're eating chips. You can, yeah.
No, but my point is that you can encounter God and you can believe in God without exhaustively knowing everything about God, but we can know a lot about God. I can tell you a lot of stuff about the grains of sand on Earth. I just can't tell you everything about them. I can't tell you the rotational orientation of each and every one of them.
Neither can I.
Right. But we still can encounter the beach. We can go to the beach. We can stick our hands in the sand and feel the heat. And it's the same thing with God. We can encounter him and we can know that he is the best.
Sure. I think people who think they have been in contact with Christ are just deluded.
Of course you believe that. If you didn't believe that, what would that mean?
Not just like mistaken, but actually deluded.
Yeah, I think that if I'm wrong about Christianity, I am deluded. I don't think that I can somehow be wrong about Christianity and not be deluded. If I'm wrong, I'm deluded. If you're wrong, you're deluded. There's no difference. Now, we can't both be right. We could both be wrong. We could both be wrong. Atheism could be wrong, Christianity could be wrong, and Judaism could be correct.
I don't think it's a matter of like picking a side.
Well, there is a truth. You've admitted that there's an eternal truth.
I have not admitted there's an eternal truth.
Yeah, you have. You said 2 + 2 is 4 eternally. You said that. Well, I have it on tape.
Yeah, that is right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But you're going to twist that to making me think that...
No, I'm not twisting it.
Well, you said an eternal truth. There are many eternal truths then.
Yeah, just take all those truths and just put them in one nice big pile. Pile them up. You can't do it practically. It's too hard, right? Just like the grains of sand. But in principle, you can say, yeah, truth here, non-truth there.
Right.
Oh, here's my truth, right? That is eternal, unchanging, and that is God Almighty. That's the God I worship. And unwittingly, it's the God that you worship too.
Why do you think I believe in God all of a sudden?
Because you believe in truth, and God is truth.
That is the most bullshit thing I've ever heard come out of someone's mouth.
I'm not saying that you know you believe in God. I'm saying that you do acknowledge eternal, unchanging truth. Therefore, if you see the value in that, you're seeing the value in my God, whether you know it or not.
I haven't seen evidence for any gods yet.
But you see that 2 + 2 is 4.
So 2 + 2 = 4, therefore God is what
That's a proof of God.
How's that a proof of God?
It's a proof of God. It's an eternal, unchanging truth. That's what God is.
But why?
You believe in goodness.
2 + 2 = 4, then why does that also equate to God existing? And why specifically your God?
There's only one God.
According to
logic and reason. Because God is perfection. And if there are two gods, either they both have the same set of perfections, which includes simplicity and immateriality, in which case they're one, because there's nothing to distinguish them, or there's something to distinguish them. And in that case, if there's something to distinguish them, then one of them is lacking something that the other has that he doesn't have. And if he's lacking something, he's not God, because God doesn't lack any perfection.
So if there's two gods, there's no gods?
If you want to make a case for two gods, then you're making a case for two false gods, if they differ. If you're saying that they don't differ, then you may be making the case for the one true God, or you may be making the case for one false God. Because it all depends on what you're attributing to God. Are you attributing evil to God? Then it's not God. The God that you are angry with, that doesn't exist in your mind, I agree he doesn't exist, he doesn't exist. The God that you don't like doesn't exist, because he's not perfect.
He consciously gives people cancer, according to you, right?
No, he's not the source of any evil. He gave us free will.
But cancer's not evil, it's good.
Cancer is a parasite on the good. It's falling away from reality. It's falling away from being.
Well, then how good is cancer?
Everything is good to the extent that it is.
I don't know how you can possibly think that.
Is a knife good?
For cutting things, yeah.
The knife is ontologically good, and the cancer is ontologically good.
But the function,
to the extent that it is.
The function of a knife typically is to cut things, right? Which is a fine.
And what's the function of cancer?
To kill people. Well, it has no conscious function, just like the knife doesn't.
It's a very delicate and dangerous thing talking about good and evil and talking about the objective goodness of everything that is. But if you know what God is, and you know that he's perfect, and you know that he's not capable of evil.
But you said you can't comprehend God, so how do you know he's...
Because I told you also we can apprehend God. I can't chart out every cubic centimeter of the ocean, but I can go to the ocean, I can dive into the ocean, I can feel the ocean, I can touch the ocean, I can be immersed in the ocean, right? So I don't need to have every scientific fact at my fingertips about every cubic centimeter of the ocean to encounter the ocean. Same thing with God. I can know that God is perfect. I can know that God is one. I can know that God is simple. I can know that God is not the source of any evil. I can know that without fully comprehensively comprehending him. So if you know who God is, and if you know what God is, then everything will flow from that. And all the sexual morality that confuses the atheist and the non-believer.
Homosexuals as well. Right.
The truly faithful Christian homosexual is tormented by his desires, but he's willing to fight.
But why is it a bad thing to have sex with someone from your own sex?
Because our human nature wasn't designed for that. Our human nature was designed...
Don't you dare tell a person that they shouldn't be who they are.
You are free to do what you want. You can indulge in every impulse and every instinct and every lower base appetite that you have. You can. You're free to do so. I invite you to think about it and respond to your delicate conscience and to do the right thing. And if you do fall into error, it's not a big deal. Just repent and try not to do it again, that's all. And this applies to all sin. It's not a big deal. Just try to learn from your mistakes. Don't do it again. Repent. Go to confession if you're Catholic. If you're not Catholic, do whatever you do in your religion. So what would you say to anyone that's listening if you wanted to sort of give them a picture of where you're coming from? Because everyone has their own kind of path.
Right. Well, I want to say to any atheists out there listening who are currently too scared to come out as atheists because their parents are very religious and you're scared to come out because you're afraid of what your parents will do, go online, go find some support groups and go meet like-minded atheist friends, right? Because you're not wrong in thinking that there is no God, because their evidence isn't good enough and you're right. So good on you for being an atheist. Being an atheist isn't hard because we don't have to claim anything. We're just saying, look, we don't believe there are any gods because all the God claims are not sufficient enough at all. The evidence you have, we don't call evidence because it's not scientific evidence. And scientific evidence means that you can look at it again and again, repeat experiments on it, even have different people repeat the same experiments, and you'll get the same results over and over, right? Scientifically tested. Boom. So it's very easy to be an atheist, and when religious people come and talk to you, they won't understand. They will think that deep down you believe in God, which is, I'm not going to say insulting, because I mean they're just wrong, but just know that you're coming from the right place when you're rejecting these claims. You probably have theist friends right now who, you know, are being limited by their religion. For example, maybe they want to have sex before marriage, but they're told not to, so they're really frustrated and they feel angry. Maybe that makes them want to get married super quickly, so they rush relationships and they feel bad because of that, because they end up breaking up. That happens a lot. Atheists typically tend to be more accepting of homosexuals, as you've seen in this interview here. You can do what you want, really, as long as you are a good person to people's well-being, which is what I think humankind should strive to do. I don't think we should spend any time pleasing God at all. Even if God were real, you shouldn't worry about him. He's already God. He doesn't need any more love or attention. You should be helping out your fellow human being instead, even if there was a God.
If you like your worldview, if you think it's swell, if you've got some questions, ask me and I'll tell. All you got to do is ask. All you got to do is ask.